Hello, today I'm going to discuss post-colonialism, structuralism, and narratology. Post-colonialism is an approach that examines the impacts of colonialism on colonizers and the colonized, exploring the complex power dynamics that emerged during and after the colonial experience. From a post-colonial perspective, Western values and traditions of thought and literature are guilty of repressive ethnocentrism. Models of Western thought or of literature have dominated world culture, marginalizing or excluding non-Western traditions and forms of cultural life and expression. Three exponents of post-colonial theory are Edward Said, Gayatri Spivak, and Homi K. Bhabha. Edward Said's Orientalism deals with the long-term images, stereotypes, and general ideology about the Orient as the other. The Western depicts and conceptualizes the East as exotic, backward, and inferior, serving colonial interests. Spivak proposes in her Can the Subaltern Speak? That to be heard and to be known, the subaltern native must adopt Western ways of knowing, for example, language, thought, and reasoning. Because of such westernization, a subaltern people can never express their native ways of knowing and, instead, must conform the native expression of knowledge to the Western colonial ways of knowing the world. Bhabha argued that hybridity and mimicry create ambivalence in the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. The project of domesticating and civilizing indigenous populations is founded on the ideas of repetition, imitation, and resemblance. Because of this, the ambivalence is caused by the psychological mirroring of the colonial master by the subject. Next, I will comment on structuralism, which is an intellectual movement which began in France in the 1950s. Its essence is in the belief that things cannot be understood in isolation. They have to be seen in the context of the larger structures they are part of. These structures are those imposed by our way of perceiving the world, an organizing experience rather than objective entities already existing in their external world. The structuralist approach to literature moves away from the interpretation of the individual literary work and drives towards understanding the larger abstract structures which contain them. Saussure, a Swiss linguist, was a key figure in the development of modern approaches to language study. Saussure concentrated on the patterns and functions of language in use today, with the emphasis on how meanings are maintained and established and on the functions of grammatical structures. Claude Lévi-Strauss applied the structuralist outlook to the interpretation of myth. He suggested that the individual tale from a cycle of myths did not have a separate and inherent meaning, but could only be understood by considering its position in the whole cycle, and the similarities and differences between that tale and others in the sequence. Roland Barthes applied the structuralist method to the general field of modern culture. He examined modern France from the standpoint of a cultural anthropologist in a little book called Mythologist. Finally, the next topic is narratology, which is a branch of structuralism, and it is a study of how narratives make meaning and what the basic mechanisms and procedures are common to all acts of storytelling. First, it is important to make a distinction between story and plot. Story is the actual sequence of events as they happen. Plot is those events as they are edited, ordered, packaged, presented in what we recognize as narrative. There are three main narratologists. First, Aristotle, who identifies three elements in the plot that all stories have in common. First, the amartya, which is a sin or a fault. The anagnorisis, which means recognition or realization. And the peripeteia, which means turn round or a reversal of fortune. Second, Vladimir Prop, who is a Russian formalist critic who worked on Russian folk tales, identifying recurring structures and situations in such tales. He concluded that all these tales are constructed by selecting items from a basic repertory of 31 functions. And third, we have Gerard Genet, who was focused on how a story is told. That is to say, he was interested in the process of telling itself. He discussed 6 particular areas. First, the basic narrative mode. Is it mimetic or diegetic? Second, how the narrative is focalized. Third, who is telling the story. 4, how time is handled. 5, how the story is packaged. And 6, how speech and thought are presented.